I wish I had learned this truth many years ago. Be thankful for the days, good and bad.
All right, welcome to another episode of Warrior versus Zombie, and I am really excited to introduce our warrior guest to you today. You've met her before if you've been with us since the beginning, Mica Alexander, and I'll reintroduce her to you in a second, but first let me tell you why you're here. Success is a journey, it's not a destination. As warriors, we all have a history of ups and downs, wins and losses, that are all part of making us who we are up to this point, and they provide a foundation for our path forward. We all battle our inner zombie as well as those zombies in our world, and in each episode, I interview warriors from all walks of life. I interview entrepreneurs, artists, health practitioners, business owners, literally any inspired leader that has a story to tell. These warriors have a cause. They have unique value and a vision that goes generations into the future. And Mica is no exception. If you've heard her before, she's an amazing warrior. She's a wife, a mother, an entrepreneur, executive, consultant, speaker, and now an author. She holds a master's in counseling psychology from New Mexico State University and a master's in business administration from the University of Colorado. Mica is a mental health advocate, an adventurer, and a military spouse supporter, and I love all of those things. Her warrior journey includes traveling the world as a military spouse and counselor, which led to a stint as a C-suite business executive. Today, she's an author, dividing her time between family, traveling, speaking, consulting, operating her business, Tokyo Escapes, and promoting her new book, My Year Without Him, The Life of a Military Wife. With her son in the military now and her daughter in college, she lives in Dallas, Texas, with her husband, youngest daughter, and their 2 dogs. Mica Alexander, welcome to Warrior versus Zombie. It's so great to see you today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, David. Thank you so much for having me again. Your show has definitely evolved over the last couple of years, I see.
Yeah, well, hopefully it's a journey, as I say in the song and the podcast. You know, it's hopefully I'm getting better. Sometimes I get done and I think, well, you know, the guest was great, the warrior was great. I'm not so sure I handled that quite the way I wanted to, but you know, it is what it is, and quite frankly, I love it. And the thing is that we were talking before we started. You were episode 4. This is episode 87. So you have a perspective of doing that. And the funny thing is, or the cool thing about it is, you in episode 4 were my guinea pig for doing this on Zoom, because we hit the zombie apocalypse and couldn't do it in the studio. And you, as a warrior, you stepped up and said, sure, I'll do it on Zoom. And I think, as you mentioned, you did it in a closet, and
Yes.
It was all audio only then, so that nobody could see the closet. Now we're audio and video, and we do a replay, and we're on the Be Connected platform, so it's fun. So we're going to get into your story, and we'll catch up a little bit. But what's new and exciting going on in your world today with this book and all the other things? Are you having fun?
Yes, I'm having fun. I'm getting great feedback, emotional feedback, and I feel like it's helping people realize, you know, that we all have a story, and all of us have obstacles that we have to overcome. And sometimes it's not easy, but, you know, you dig in and you get through them. And I really hope that those that are not familiar with the military, or the military spouses of our nation, are able to look at my book and hopefully get some help from it, to know that they're not alone.
Yeah, I would say that the thing, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure, more, but from the time we talked back in 2020, when this whole podcast was getting started, and we were just trying to figure out what was happening with the world, and it was we actually said some things back then that seemed almost prophetic when we were talking, because we said things like, it is not going to go away quickly. And at that point in time, people were thinking, oh yeah, it's just going to, no, we knew better. And it's created challenges, but opportunities between then and there. And so let's do this. I really want to get into your story, and I want to, we can talk about how you got from where you started in your warrior journey to today. And I want to refresh people's memory on that. But also, there's been a lot changed in the last couple of years since we talked with your kids. I know how that goes with your husband's now retirement, and there's just a lot of things. So let's, a lot of stuff. So let's do this. Let's take a quick break. We'll hear a little of Ricky Jean Wright and our theme song for the audio audience, and we'll be right back to hear Mica's story on warrior versus zombie.
But the miles become the teacher, while the student learns real slow, traveling blind most of the time. Wherever you go, it's not the getting there, it's the journey every day. It's not a race to see how many people.
All right, we are back, and Mica, I can't wait. I've missed you. I mean, you were pretty regularly in our networking group, and then we weren't. Nobody was getting together, and you had a day job, and you've done a lot of stuff. I know little bits and pieces of it, but I'm really excited to share with the audience this story that I just touched on in the introduction. So tell us how you got from where you started to where you are today.
Okay, well, so for my book, I actually wrote my book back in 2017, and I wasn't writing it for it to become a book. At the time, we were living in Japan. My husband was active duty military, and I was writing it as a means of coping. So I was really coping with his absence. I never was like, oh, I'm going to be an author. And then I sat on it. In 2020, right before the pandemic started, I actually started exploring publishing options. But at the time, I just wasn't ready to publish it. It's very intimate. It's very personal. Mm-hmm. And I just wasn't ready. I didn't know if I could, honestly, if I could handle, hearing about my story. Mm-hmm. And what happened is, after the pandemic kind of started going on, right? We moved. I actually got recruited back into mental health, where I was a C-suite executive at a hospital. Did that for about a year, and then became a consultant. And the reason that I published the book was because of all the mental health challenges that have been going on with the pandemic, mm-hmm. especially for the teenagers. Right. I think, I've told my kids this over and over, and I'm sure you can relate to this too, is, this has been a time that's never been like one in history. They're going to talk about this time to their children. And I think the mental health challenges of people having to be separated, not being able to be with their friends, social media, keeping up with school, and then just kids like wondering who they are, their identity, what's going on with them, what does that look like? And so I published to hopefully help other mothers and military wives and spouses that they're not military wives per se, but their husbands or wives, they travel all the time. So they're by themselves. And that's really, becoming a thing. I mean, it's very, very common now for one or both parents to be gone. I do think we have to address the issues. And I do think that we can make a difference, but we have to be aware of it, right? I mean, we have to be aware of how things are affecting people.
So, and again, we're going to get into, in the next segment, we're going to get into the book and some of the the things of that and some of your what you're doing, where you're at with Tokyo Escapes and that kind of thing. But as we talked the first time, you were kind of talking about your journey and going through, and you hadn't published the book yet, and we were talking about some of the challenges along the way with your story, and I know what the book, and I know the focus of the book, and so I do want to do that in the third segment, but I want to talk a little bit about your own personal warrior journey as, like I say, as a mother. You've got some things that are going on. Your kids are changing. You've got, I think, still one at home, but you have two now. I mean, the time frame of the book, you had
all three,
and they were going through different aspects. I think one was going off to getting ready to go to college, and you're in different parts of the world, and it's fascinating. I mean, the book, I haven't completed it, but I started reading it, like I told you before we started, and it is very authentic. You say intimate, and it's intimate, and you are sharing some of the conversations and some of the emotions, which has really been over the last 2 years since we got together. I've also gone through. We're a military family. I'm not, but I'm a grandparent of somebody who's in active military in the Air Force, just like Trent, just like you guys. So I can kind of, I'm at a different place, but let's talk about you going from a mental health professional. You talked about in the first episode about being in the prison system, so how did this is kind of a cool journey. I mean, you've done
a lot of different jobs, for sure.
And you've always figured things out. The thing I love about you, and the thing about your story, and the things I've heard, is that you're have one of the key attributes of a warrior, and a warrior focuses forward. You don't stay parked in an area where there's a challenge, and you don't let your challenges keep you from continuing to focus forward. I know that about you. So tell me a little bit about some of those little transition points in your life.
Well, I think, being a military spouse, I think you really, to be successful as a military spouse, I think you really have to pivot well, be able to adapt to your environment, create your own community. And I've done that wherever, my husband, he retired after 21 years. And I was put in many situations where we were living overseas. I have all this education. I'm a professional, and I couldn't work, so I had to go back to school or get heavily involved in volunteering or something like that. The last duty station he had in Japan, I was fortunate because I actually did work. And I was actually an advisor for the commander. So I was a part of the leadership team for that base. But I think for me, it's always been like with our kids, they're watching, and I've never forgot that, because I want them to always know that they can do whatever they set their mind to. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional.
It's okay. It's all right. You know it is okay.
And so when I would struggle, and I would struggle, and I would be alone, and I would be sad, I had to remember that. And sorry, David.
It's okay. The thing is, I appreciate it even more now, honestly, than I did then. And again, you mentioned at one point in our conversation already about the benefit to people. I traveled. I put 4 million miles on airlines. I was away Monday. I didn't have the long deployments. I think the longest was one deal that I did in New Zealand. But just the insight and the realization of you kind of powering through those things. But when you have kids, it's a different thing. I have 5, you have 3. The point is, you want them to realize that, life is full of challenge, and it's full of support. Hopefully you're giving them the support, and they're going to face the challenges. And it's clear in your story and in some of the things I've already read in your book, where you were focused forward and you were powering through those in a way. And you never know what they're going to see, right? You never know what they're going to take away. Right. So you can only hope that where you've been in your weaker moments, they've learned from that, hey, I don't want to do that. And in your stronger moments, they've said, I want to be like mom, or I want to be like that, right? I mean, that's
sure.
That's what we're all hoping for.
Well, and I think, my middle daughter, Alicia, she actually told me, and this was like after we had left Japan and he had retired, her outlook on that year was very different than mine. She's like, Mom, you did so great with Dad gone. And I think she was maybe 13 when she told me this. Wow. She's like, you did so great with Dad gone, and and you didn't falter and things went well. And I'm just so glad you were there for us. And I'm like, wow.
Wow. And the thing is, that's a beautiful thing. And as they grow older, being older myself and having older children now, and they're going through their own stuff, you'll have the opportunity. And when they maybe read your book, or they hear this podcast, or they hear this discussion, they're going to get a glimpse below the surface. I mean, I find with my own kids now, I'm saying, yeah, it looked like that. Maybe that looked easy, but it sucked. It was terrible. There's things that went on in my journey after I retired 16 years ago, and going through the transition from, corporate big bucks, travel and doing all this stuff, to really being present. And that sounds really great and wonderful, but it's not easy. But you want, going through that, you only hope that your children see the attributes of support that you're given, but also realize there's challenges along the way, just like.
Well, and I always talk about resiliency with my kids, and overcoming, because I just want them to always know that they can do whatever they put their mind to, and that sometimes life gives you lemons, right? But you make lemonade, and how you do that, how you react to things, how you cope with things. That's how you get through, and that's how you're successful. And then I also always wanted them to know I love them and we love them. And, there's no doubt there at all that, me or their dad is going to show up.
Yep. And I'll tell you what, that's the most important thing. As I always say, they spell love, TIME, time. It's really knowing. And I pray, with my own children, that they all know, no matter what, whether they're the president or a prisoner, that I'm going to be there for them, because that's my job. I mean, that's the job as a parent. The resilience is it means so much more to me, honestly, Mica, today. Just now I'm going to get emotional.
Well, I did earlier, so now it's your turn.
So, but just having the opportunity, and I consider it a blessing to live a year in the life of my military family and see the growth of the children, of my grandkids.
Absolutely.
And seeing the way they adapt. They're now at a new school in Oklahoma. They were in school here in the Arlington, and they were in school in Washington State, and they've gone through that, and where those kinds of things, frankly, in my life, as I reflect back in my own story and think about, I would have never wanted to deal with that as a kid. I didn't want to leave my friends. I didn't want to be away. I didn't want to have to do it, but that was a challenge. Mm-hmm. But having a parent like you and the military families like my daughter and the others that I've seen, knowing that they build that resilience in those children. And they're the most resilient kids I've ever seen. And so it's actually, they're going to look back and go, yeah, my mom, it's more than just, hey, you really did a good job during this one time. They're going to realize when they get older, if they haven't already, how powerful that opportunity was. It was a challenge.
Well, and I think, my niche was always, I want you to be a good human. Like success is another thing, but I want you to just be a good human. And I think inadvertently, I feel like our kids, they're all leaders. They all have such natural leadership capabilities. They can go anywhere and become part of the community because of the life they've led, because we have lived all over. They have changed schools. They have had to adapt. So I think resiliency is definitely key. And, they actually make fun of me now when I use the word resiliency. They're like, oh my gosh, Mom, resiliency. But it's true because they are, and they have really come through the last few years. I do want to mention something that, and you probably can relate to this, David, for active duty members, they have their own world, right, that they got to take care of and everything. As they go up in rank, their responsibility increases. And I think, and people think that's glamorous. Like, I don't know if you've seen, Top Gun recently.
Oh yeah.
Which, there's parts and pieces to that. Okay. Yes. Flying and those kinds of things, but a lot of it is not glamorous. And it is behind the scenes. But I think the last few years, my husband was in the military because he went up in rank because of his position. It was more demanding for our family, truthfully. So I think about that, and I think our kids just came through it like champs. Like they all had stuff, they all had things they had to get through, but they really did. And I'm so proud of them. I'm proud of our family. For sure, it's one of the things I'm most proud of as a mother is just the resilience of our family and doing that together.
Well, you deserve to be proud. Well, we could talk, just because of the affinity here and just because of we could talk a lot about the story and the journey, but I do want to take another quick break and I want to come back and I want to really focus on, what you're doing today. I know you've kind of extracted yourself from the consulting and that kind of stuff to a degree, and you're now focused on promoting the book and rethinking or figuring out what Tokyo Escapes looks like in the new world. So let's take a quick break. We'll hear a little bit more of Ricky Jean Wright and our theme song for those listening to this on the audio platform. And we'll be right back with Mica Alexander and Warrior versus Zombie.
It's not a race to see how many people know your name. One day you realize time was worth more than the gold. It's not the getting there. When you get there, you'll know. Funny how wisdom and youth are.
All right. So I knew it was going to be an emotional podcast. From my own standpoint, and I know we touch on things that are always going to hit a nerve, so that's truly okay. But let's talk now, as I said, about kind of, you said you were writing the book, you didn't intend to write the book, or you were writing journals and doing that, and then you got to this. So first, I want to kind of understand, like why you're doing it. And I already know, I've started reading the book, and I already know you, so I kind of know the unique perspective or value that you bring to that conversation. And then I want to talk about a little more. You've already hit on some of those about the impact you want to have with that as we move forward. So take it away.
Well, so right now we do have our own business. We started several years before the pandemic. Tokyo Escapes, it's a travel company. Because when we got back to the States, everybody kept asking us about Japan. So we're like, yeah, we'll take you to Japan. So we do that. Obviously, with the pandemic, that's been on hold. We're hoping to revitalize that in the next year or so. And I have been doing some consulting work. I do consulting work with behavioral health care companies because I have been in behavioral health care for over 20 years, first as a clinician and then as an executive. So right now, I am really focused on my book and getting the word out there, doing speaking engagements, doing things like this podcast, radio, things like that. And just kind of taking a breath, because I feel like I've been running on all cylinders, literally, since my husband was in the military. Like, even though he retired in 2019 with the pandemic, raising our children, launching one to college, and moving our family again into a house. We relocated his parents during the pandemic as well. So it's been a lot of moving parts. And so now I'm just really taking a breath, and really, I believe that, God has a purpose for me. And so I'm just trying to be obedient and, listen and try to help people wherever I can when it comes to my book and it comes to their journey.
So with your book, again, I want to talk just a little bit about that, because I love the way, like I said, I've started reading it, and I love the way you've interspersed communications between you and your husband, along with kind of your takeaways from those, and and I know it was kind of started off as a journal and stuff. What are if somebody's reading the book, what are you hoping that they take away from that? What kinds of messages and things are you hoping for?
That, what, you can do anything when you put your mind to it. If you surround yourself with a great community, you keep your priorities straight, and that, life is always going to give you obstacles, but, I truly believe sometimes life gives us obstacles to get through them, right? To help us learn something, maybe to help us realize something, to help us have a different perspective. I really see my book as a voice for the military community. I do think that over the last 20 to 25 years, the pace of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the airmen, as well as all the other branches, them and their families, I just don't think there's a lot of highlight on that. Because we serve too, right? And I always told the kids that growing up, is you serve too. It's not just dad. We make sacrifices as well. And I just think that I hope that this can inspire people to know, again, that they're not alone and that they can get through anything they put their mind to. And I also hope that it highlights, military spouses, because I will tell you, one of the hardest things of being a military spouse, it's not like it was 100 years ago or even 50 years ago, where women stayed home. The man had the career, the wife stayed home with the children. These days, most military spouses are professionals. They're educated. They've been to college, or they have a certain skill, the cosmetologist or whatever it is. So it's very different. And us molding and fitting into the military community takes work. It takes grit, and just finding your place. Like I said, I think in an earlier section, there was places where I couldn't work. There was not opportunities for me to work. And the idea of remote work just really wasn't on the table. There was a lot more entry-level positions, which some women do, and I'm not knocking that. But being a military spouse, especially if you're career-driven, has been a challenge for sure. There has been times where I've stayed home. There's been times where I've worked. There's been times where I went back to school. There's been times where I've just taken a break. So just navigating that, because I will tell you, unfortunately, I'm going to say this, not to knock people, but unfortunately, some companies will not hire military spouses because they know you're going to leave.
Right.
So, and they won't say that to your face, but that's why you don't get the job, because they know you're going to leave. So I know there's been some more advocacy with a couple of the administrations and, presidents and Congress to advocate more for military spouses. Because one thing I always ran into was trying to get licensed. I'm a licensed counselor. I've been licensed in over 4 different states. And sometimes I wasn't able to get licensed, even though I had been a clinician for 10 years, because I didn't have the actual education requirements. So even though I had been an acting clinician for 10 years.
Right.
So those kinds of things was really, that was difficult. But I think with my book, I just wanted to inspire people and to know that, what, your journey is what you make it, and I think I say this in the book, I always would say, off to our next adventure with the kids, because how I frame it and how I look at it is how they would. So if I was a Debbie Downer, or if I was like, oh, I don't want to move here, oh, I got to do this, they get that vibe.
Yeah, that energy for sure is there. And, I will just put a plug in here for military spouses and so on. And, you mentioned in the first podcast, I remember you saying that, a lot of the folks that get to the place where you're at, they're not married anymore. The challenge becomes too great. I think the whole concept that you shared, and I've seen it in spades in the military community, is for those that are successful and those that make it through, the spouses are a team. They are, and I would say that I've heard it, so I'm kind of quoting. My son-in-law would say, my daughter is more a part of the military than he is at times, in terms of her willingness and desire to, because if you're in leadership, your spouse is in leadership too. And this, if you're living, especially I've seen them, I've been with them on base, I've been with them, and there's an expectation for the spouse, just like there is, and it may be a different role, but it's still leading a community of those that are supporting those military. And that is so critical. It's so critical, not only the example to your children as they move forward and become spouses themselves, and whether it's military or not, right? But it's also a leadership role that you carry, whether you have another job outside or not, right? And that's one of the things that I've learned in the last couple of years, just being there kind of on the front lines in a little bit of experience there with that.
Well, and I think and in my book, I talk about this. So my husband was, he's a pilot. He went on, and when he deployed and I was writing this book, he was a commander. He was doing his command tour in Afghanistan. And I had also been working on the base for 4 years, and I was an advisor to the commander. So we were very visible parts of the community. So anywhere we would go, and I talk about this in the book, I mean, the kids got to the point where they were like, I don't want to go to the grocery store with you, Mom, because everybody talks to you. But the other piece was, as you alluded to, is the leadership piece. People are watching. And so I was part of that leadership team. So I couldn't be down and out and be out in public. I mean, those moments were private, and I talk about that in the book. I had to have high energy. I was leading a bunch of different teams, doing a bunch of different things with the community, with the helping agencies, with the resiliency, with the squadrons. Like, I had to be up, and I had to be present every day. And we lived in a kind of a small America. I mean, we were overseas, but it was kind of like small America where everyone knew everybody. The great thing about that was, and my son would probably not say this because he was a senior in high school, the year I wrote that book, he always would say, oh, everybody knows me, Mom. I'm like, yeah, the security forces team. Yeah, I know them really well. And so they kept an eye out, on the kids, on base, on teams, on everything. I mean, everybody knew everybody. So that was definitely a plus, looking at it from that perspective.
Yeah, it definitely brings some unique challenges. But like we always say, right, life is all about challenge and support. and we all have our different challenges. Well, I think the book is, I can't wait to finish reading it. It won't take me long because I read pretty fast, so I'm gonna get that, and I would encourage folks to do that. Well, let's do this. There's so many things we could talk about, and again, I'm so excited to get back to talking to you and hearing where things are at. Let's take another quick break, and we'll come into what I call the land the plane segment, appropriate for this Air Force type discussion, but also because I traveled all the time. And we'll come back, and today I want you to share, whether it's from the book, from our conversation, from wherever you're at this point. If we take away anything from the podcast, what would you want us to take away? And then I want to make sure people know how to best stay connected to you as you move forward and they move forward on their journey. So let's take a quick break. Hear a little more for the audio audience of Ricky Jean Wright, and we'll be right back with Mica Alexander and Warrior versus Zombie.
Funny how wisdom and youth are always two different games. The years flew by so fast, is the common human complaint. The memories in our minds turn to diamonds in our soul, and by the grace of God.
All right, they always go too fast. I'm really excited to have people hear a little of your story and kind of get engaged and realize what a powerful tool or thing your book is going to be. But as I said before we took the break, if we take away anything from this podcast, what would you want us to take away?
Okay, that's a big question, David.
What you said last time.
Yeah. I know, it is a big question. I would say that especially really that, you can do anything that you set your mind to, and God has a purpose for you. It may not be the purpose you just think you should have, but really to take a moment, be present in your environment, and know that, we all go through seasons, we all go through transitions, and, accept where you're led, and it'll work out for sure.
Well, that's very powerful. You actually hit about 4 different warrior nuggets there, all in the same conversation, but anything is possible. That's one of the things we talk about, and you have to stay present. That's when the song says it's a journey every day, that means that how you're going to affect your future is really today. So that's a very powerful reminder in that anything is possible, whether you're a kid listening to this podcast or whether you're on the latter part of your journey, anything is still possible. And being present and embracing those opportunities, going with what God or the universe has put before you and dealing with that, and not spending all your time wishing it were different, which is another way of saying, I think, what you said. So that's beautiful. And truly you've lived that, and truly your book that shows the reality, the intimacy, the authenticity is really inspiring to me. So how do we, aside from going on Amazon right away and grabbing a copy of your book, how do we stay in touch with you? You're on the Be Connected platform. I know you're not real active there, but they still can find you. Mica Alexander I checked, and you can find you there. And this is up and is live on the Be Connected platform, and will be in replay on that platform, as well as all the other audios. So how else would you like us to reach out to you?
So I actually have a website, theauthormica.com. And that has a little about me, where you can buy the book. You can buy it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. And this is copy. There's actually one right there, sitting right there. And that is the easy. It has all my contact information on there. I also, my Instagram is the same, the author Mica. So I kept it consistent. So I'm easy to find. So yes. And I really hope that, if you hear my story and you think this might resonate with someone that I hope that you send them a copy of the book, because I really do want people to hear the stories of military wives and of people just getting, digging in and getting through, because I think it's important.
Well, the authormica.com or the author Mica on other platforms. That's pretty easy. Yes. And Mica Alexander on the Be Connected platform. And I will just say this, I really, really, really am glad you wrote the book. I think that, that was a divine action that you took. And I think it will change lives. And one of the things that I say, whether it's takes the form of a podcast, whether it takes the form of a presentation, whether it takes the form of a book, a movie, I don't care. I've been talking to a lot of people. Don't die with your story in you. Tell your story. And I think reading your book and seeing how that translated into something that can make a difference is inspiring to me to finish my own book and complete that whole process, because it really is great. Well, Mica, thank you for sharing again. Hopefully your journey continues. If there's anything that we can do for you, we want to do that. And hopefully this will inspire some folks in our audience. But thanks.
Okay. Thank you, David. Thank you for having me. You are phenomenal. And I really wish you the best on your podcast going forward. It's really taking off. I'm glad for you.
Yeah. And I'm excited as well. And I'm excited to share you with our audience. And, who knows? Who knows? All right. Well, for those listening to this in the audio platform or on the replays, we'll be back next Thursday at 11 a.m. Don't forget to pick up a copy of My Year Without Him from Mica Alexander and see what it's like behind the scenes to be a military spouse and to have a military member having spouse and family. I mean, it cuts both ways. So her book does a good job of illustrating that. So with that, let's hear the final outro of It's Not the Getting There by Ricky Jean Wright, and we'll be back next week with Warrior versus Zombie.
It's not the getting there, it's the journey every day. It's not a race to see how many people know your name. One day you realize time was worth more than the gold. It's not the getting there. When you get there, you'll know. One day you realize time was worth more than the gold. It's not the getting there. When you get there, you'll know.